Hello, welcome.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
the GCC, Imran. It's good to have you here with us at Gems Arabia. We've been meaning to have this discussion for quite some time. And
It's a long time coming.
yes, yeah. Delighted to have you on. And what better than ShopTalk Luxe to talk about this great experience. So what brings you here?
Well, I first came to Abu Dhabi in November, so just a few months ago. And I was quite taken with the change that's happening here. And in particular, the really long-term perspective. I think that, the people thinking about, how they want, this city to fit into the wider region and the changes that are happening here. And I was very intrigued. So began building a relationship with some of the people at Audio. And they invited me back here to host a little breakfast as part of ShopTalk Luxe, and I'll be speaking on stage a bit later. So multiple reasons, but feeling very, very happy to be back.
Fantastic. Huge week in Paris. Mathieu Blazy and Dior, the incredible evolution that's just happening in fashion now. What are your thoughts culturally on this new narrative that's happening in fashion?
Yeah, in September, BOF coined this moment, this time of great change, as the Great Fashion Reset. And it's been nice to see that language stick. I see it popping up all over the place. And the reason we called it that was, the industry is in such a moment of change, and I'd say more disruption. I think you could even use the word crisis. There's a lot of things at work at the moment, but one of the things that clearly the industry's been looking for is a creative change. And so this week in Paris, it was really, really exciting to see at the two biggest couture houses, two of the most talented designers give us their impression or rendition or idea of what couture should be for a brand like Chanel or a brand like Dior. I was really fortunate to spend time with both Jonathan and Mathieu before their shows and to see the clothes up really close, but then also to experience the show. And I always find it so interesting because when you get to see haute couture up really close, you can really, really appreciate the craftsmanship. That everything is made by hand. Everything is so meticulously created. And then when you experience a show, you can kind of see the grander, bigger vision. Because of course, couture is a dream factory, right? It's what creates the image of the brand. It's what helps create the kind of overall halo around the brand that then enables companies like Dior and Chanel to sell everything from, gowns all the way down to lipstick and makeup and, other products. And then you see the way these shows play out on the internet, which is also really interesting, right? And so the way couture looks up when you feel it up close, the way it exists when you're at the physical show, and then the way you see it online is all very different.
Completely.
And I think what gets slightly lost online is, some of the real detail and intricacy that's required to create really beautiful handmade clothes like that. And it's just interesting to see the different reactions and the different perspectives. But I thought, given that we were looking for this new injection of creativity at both of those brands, I was very impressed and very excited to see both of those visions come to life. It was really, really remarkable.
I mean, the fact that the ceramicist was the guiding light into those dresses and the process that it takes Jonathan Anderson is just incredible. And now, I think with social media now, it's not a priority anymore. It's about the quality. Like, if you look at the Chanel dresses, from social media, they don't have the essence or the importance as they would when you go up close and you feel them, which I haven't. But we have many friends that kind of went and saw it. But it's incredible to see how I feel now. The offline is also kind of appreciated in fashion. And I think that with Jonathan Anderson, for example, the way he talks about the maison and how many are remaking old dresses, it shows that the heritage is still very much there with the brand. And it blew my mind. I would love to be part of that couture evolution where I'm noticing a lot of designers actually going and celebrities, whether it's Kim Kardashian or whomever, revisiting old archives and making new dresses from the old days. So it's a whole other world that we don't know about. And I agree with you. I think it's important to understand the craft, and we're going back to that. And I feel that maybe with the evolution of couture now, people will start understanding the importance of quality. I believe that this is the values that are starting to be more appreciated now. Everything is online, the offline. In a world of noise, and as a creator of BOF, how do you stay true to your ethos and to your values when you have so much noise around you?
Yeah, it's a noisy world, isn't it? I think it's just about being really clear about your purpose. I have spent quite a bit of time over the course of the last 20 years, since I first started working in fashion, to really think carefully about what my contribution and what my purpose is in this industry. And of course, purpose isn't something that is a static thing. It's not a fixed thing. It changes over time as you change. But my goal has always been to kind of make the industry more open. As someone who came in as an outsider and who only was able to observe fashion from a distance, aided by tools like social media in the very early days, because BOF started as a blog, which is basically the first form of social media, and a newsletter, which is now something that we all have. But in those days, it was very, very unusual and actually quite exciting to be able to think about and analyze the fashion industry using these new platforms. And so coming in from the outside like that, my goal has always been to just kind of demystify the industry, to try to open it up. And that's been consistent, from the very, very beginning. And, now that...
And giving creative a seat at the table.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, now that I've been working in the industry for, almost 2 decades, I have the opportunity to really help others break into the industry, to help others see their path. When I travel to parts of the world like this, where, traditionally the Middle East or Latin America or Southeast Asia, these markets that are all growing very, very quickly, they've been on the fringes of the fashion industry. And my message when I come here is always that, this is where the future of the industry lies. So the other thing I'm really trying to do is create more of a dialogue between the global South countries and the kind of establishment in the West. The Western fashion companies, they're headquartered in London or Paris or New York, and they're kind of in an ivory tower at times. They're very far away from what's happening here on the ground, which is why I really love traveling and meeting with our community in other parts of the world, because it just helps you understand, fashion really is no longer defined by or constrained by, a Western definition or a Western gaze or a Western lens on the industry. I think what's really important is that we start integrating more voices, more creatives, and more people from other parts of the world into the global fashion conversation. And I think BOF can really play a role in that. So that's really been my guiding purpose. And so even though there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of voices, as long as we can be really clear about what our purpose is, then that kind of calms all the noise down.
you've been very proactive, whether it's Crossroads or many initiatives that you've made coming to the GCC and supporting a community. What do you think the community, the region needs more of? And what is there something?
I think more confidence. You know, it's surprising to me because, you know, whenever a few years ago I went to Cairo to attend the first Fashion Week in Cairo. And that same year, I think I traveled to the Philippines and I traveled here
Kuwait as well.
To Kuwait.
Yep.
And I kept getting the same question from people, you know, very different, you know, young people, creative people, entrepreneurs, which are like, how can I break into London or Paris or New York, you know? And my message is always the same. It's like, here in the global south, the fastest growing, the youngest demographics, the most dynamic countries and economies in the world, we need to stop seeking validation from the West. You know, and you know, we were just chatting now before the recording started. You know, the world, the global economy is at a moment of a big shift, big permanent shift. You know, power structures, the dominance of, you know, the U.S. as a kind of superpower. All of that is changing. We're moving to a multipolar world. We're moving to a world where most of the growth is going to come from new economies in developing markets. And I think, you know, we as a community, you know, we no longer need to seek this validation from the West because actually all of the dynamism, all of the optimism, all of the growth is going to come from this part of the world. And so I think it's quite interesting to have heard actually Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, who spoke at Davos last week, talking about this. We're living in a moment of disruption, not transition. And it's at moments like these when like big opportunities emerge. And you know, this kind of unipolar, you know, single superpower world that we once lived in is no longer the case. We're moving to this multipolar world. And so I think that means that, you know, if you're a young entrepreneur in the GCC, like look at other opportunities to engage with people in Southeast Asia or look at, or in South Asia. Like there's so much trade and synergy that can happen by trade and interactions with other parts of the global South, not just by seeking validation from Western capitals.
Of course, and wealth in culture and creatively as well. It's incredible. For example, I've had the privilege of interviewing brands such as Azza Fahmi or Ukhtain, who are Egyptian, and then you have like a plethora of Saudi brands that are the DNA of the brand and our identity is resonating even more so now than ever, where people would have to shy away from toning it down or watering down their heritage, but now loud and proud, you know. So it's great to see that the West is also starting to take us more seriously, and I work with a lot of different brands, and brands are also starting to take us more seriously, which is very indicative of the new perspective that's happening now. But for you, in the world of perspective, in the world of reality, when it comes to AI, blurred lines are there. You know, what is actually, reliable? What isn't? What are your thoughts on
AI? Oh, I've been enjoying this time of technological change so much.
It's a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of. Yeah, I remember when I was at university in 1994, I got my first email account. And
was it a Hotmail or was it a
No, it was
Yahoo?
actually a McGill email. This was before Hotmail existed. This was before, it was like my email address was bjz4@musicb.mcgill.ca. Okay. And nobody really was using email back then, right? I think you could, like I might have had 2 or 3 other friends at university who had an email address. And then I remember when I got my first dial-up access to be able to dial into my email account from home and where I could start checking.
It was a process.
These
I remember
groups
that.
and I didn't know we didn't know what the internet was going to become, but I was so curious about learning these these tools and using these tools, maybe a few years before they began to hit the mainstream. I think that probably only happened in 1998 or 1999, where more and more kind of people started using email and then the internet. And so I feel like we're kind of at that stage with AI right now. We're all starting to use these tools. We're starting to learn, how they work. But where they're going to go, the potential that they have, I think we're just at the very, very beginning. Like, I don't think back in 1994, I would have imagined that one day I would be able to use this little device, press a few buttons and order a taxi or get some food delivered or go on a date. All of the things that we have kind of come to use the internet for. Today, we would have never known that what was possible back then. And so for me, that's where we are with AI at the moment. We're at the early stages. Clearly, there are some incredibly important risks that we need to take into account. And we didn't take those risks into account when social media emerged. So I think, I'm cautiously optimistic about what this technology is going to do.
What kind of risks?
Well, there's clearly a risk involved around jobs. Like, what are the jobs that are going to exist?
Do you think creativity can be overpassed as well?
Listen, I think creativity is a innately human skill. But I think creative people who aren't understanding or using AI now might find themselves at a disadvantage. Today, so many creatives use the internet as their mood board, right? If you talk to like really young designers, like their mood boards aren't created with like physical images. I went and did a preview with Mathieu Blasi at Chanel the other day, and he had sourced all of these beautiful images of birds. And I'm sure some of them came from books, but some of them must have come from the internet.
It's a major theme this season, huh?
Nature. Nature, birds, mushrooms, flowers.
Yes, huh? Yeah.
It was crazy. But the reason I bring that up is like, I don't think AI can replace human creativity, but can AI boost it or inform it or help the creative process? Absolutely, yes. I think let's see how it develops. There's certainly risks to manage. It cannot replace human creativity, but it certainly can help it.
One of the pillars of why we have such a great community here that appreciates POF is the importance of business acumen. As a designer who's never had the business side, I forced myself to become more business-minded, and I think that it's very important. And I think that this is one of the strengths and one of the beauty of why people appreciate it, because you're combining fashion. It's also, guys, you need to also understand the numbers, the process, what it takes. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess it was so innate to me, because I came from a business background. I was always very creative growing up, but I was also quite analytical. So having, at BOF, our team, we call it, being left-brained and right-brained. And, as an outsider, when I first started observing how the fashion industry worked, I could see that it required this really interesting synergy and balance between, yes, creativity and design and magic, really, combined with analytics and structure and process. And it's that synergy between those two things that makes the fashion industry work. And I think I kind of stumbled into this idea of BOF because I had spent so much of my career and my education just analyzing things. So when I came to the fashion industry, what I wanted to do was just figure out how it worked. I was just building up a little map of how this whole magical industry works. And it turned out that there wasn't really anyone out there who was analyzing the industry in the way that, that I just very organically, like innately began to do it. And that was kind of an accident, really. And so when I started doing that, people really started responding to it. And I think, now BOF has been around for 19 years, if you can imagine. So, that was a very long time ago, but the media landscape at the time was very, very different. There wasn't a lot of analysis about, how big and serious a business this is. A lot of the business publications, they kind of underestimated the fashion industry. They thought it was this kind of superficial,
fluffy
group of people,
yeah.
swilling champagne and going to parties, And in the fashion media, business was kind of like, people were kind of allergic to the idea that it was a business. And so it turned out there was this gap in the market, and I kind of stumbled into it.
And I love how you're keeping the nostalgia with Tim Blanks, who is a maestro. A question I would like to ask you and Tim Blanks is, I think that a person who embodies business acumen with fashion is the late Valentino Garavani. I think that he's one of the first, correct me if I'm wrong, designers to have this kind of outlook where, I'm going to design, but I'm also going to have the right partnerships and business sense in order to move forward. Am I correct?
Well, first of all, I will say Tim Blanks is also my fashion hero. And I grew up watching him on a television show, a Canadian television show called Fashion File.
And Elsa Clench, remember?
I didn't watch Elsa Clench really because that was on CNN,
okay.
which was like a US thing. Like I grew up on Tim Blanks, Fashion File, and Jeannie Becker, Fashion TV.
Yeah.
Both of them were Canadian, both based out of Toronto. And yeah, Tim just kind of opened up the world of fashion to me as a young person growing up very, very, very far away from the fashion world, and just kind of made it interesting. With regards to Valentino Garavani, I mean, I had the opportunity last year to sit down with his partner, his business partner, Giancarlo Giametti, when they were opening the Valentino Foundation in Rome. And I think their partnership was one of the first real partnerships between a kind of a more operational business person and a purely creative person. Mr. Garavani didn't really have a business bone in his body. He was a pure creative. But that was one of the first examples that showed us that if you are a creative person and you're a pure creative person, at least have the kind of awareness that without that other side, without the business side, without someone that can challenge you, help you, structure you, and support you when things get tough.
And creatives don't always like to be told what to do.
They don't, but they need to be challenged, right? Like it's a balance. And I've seen so many really, really talented creative people get themselves into really, really difficult business situations just because they're not paying attention to some of the more mundane stuff like cash flow or supply chain management. You can create beautiful things, but if you can't manage cash and if you can't get products delivered on time, made at a certain standard of quality, at the right price point, your business will never work. And so you need both. And Mr. Giametti and Mr. Garavani are really very, very good examples of that first. There've been a lot of examples. There's Tom Ford and Domenico De Sole. There's been Marc Jacobs and Robert Duffy. There's been Giorgio Armani and his business partner. But Valentino and Giametti are like one of the original ones.
So what's next for BOF?
I mean, I think our goal is to continue to build this global community of people who work in our industry. At this stage, We're now engaging with, I think we have 120,000 paying members of BOF who are part of our community. And that's how we sustain our business, is through those subscriptions or memberships. There's millions of people who work in the fashion industry globally. And like our goal is to be the resource, the trusted authority for those people as they navigate their careers and grow their businesses in this industry. And we really want to do that on a global level, right? And so, we have members in 125 countries, which is something I'm really proud of, because in today's media climate, to be able to be a global publication that genuinely has that kind of a community around the world is really, really special, and it's not something we take for granted. So one of our goals is to really spend time in all of these markets as much as we can, meeting with our community, listening to them, figuring out how we can better serve them, just so that people can use BOF to kind of really achieve their goals and their dreams in the fashion industry.
Are there any markets that you aspire to be part of that you haven't been part of yet?
125 countries out of I think 190 some odd countries in the world is pretty good.
Of course.
I think my family is from East Africa, and so I'm particularly keen to be spending more time in sub-Saharan Africa this year. I'm trying to plan some trips out to Ghana and Nigeria later this year. So, we've never done anything on the African continent yet, which for me is like a big gap that I'd like to fill. I also spend quite a bit of time doing things in India, which is another part of my heritage. But yeah, we've been doing things, in the last few years, we've been doing things all over the world. So it's been really exciting.
And when are we going to see you in Saudi?
I don't know. Let's see.
We're all anticipating your arrival, and there's quite a community there that really appreciates all your efforts towards the communities that we have.
Thank you very much.
We have a signature question that we always ask.
Okay.
It's called, what is authenticity to you?
Authenticity is knowing yourself and being yourself without shame.
I like that. Imran, it's a pleasure. Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Of course.
And enjoy the rest of your time in the GCC.
Thank you for having me.